So no.
Oh, that was a little background.
I think we lost Catherine. Did we lose Catherine? Yes. Okay. So
Good.
to go back to the background, we will give you a little background about BioTools Innovators. So BioTools Innovator is an accelerator and competition. It's an accelerator designed to support specifically companies, startups in the life science tools and diagnostics industry. And as part of our webinar series, our summer webinar series, we are bringing together experts in the industry to talk about different topics that are important to the journey of the companies in our cohort and beyond our cohort. So today, as Catherine started to mention, we will be live streaming the panel discussion about strategic partnerships and co-development. So we will be live streaming that on our YouTube channel as well as our LinkedIn. So feel free to join us for the first 60 minutes. After 60 minutes, we will turn off the live stream and say goodbye to you, and then continue to 30 minutes of a Q&A, closed session Q&A with our cohort companies only and our panelists, of course. Without further ado, let's start. And I will start by introducing myself briefly. I'm Ayel Marom. I'm the program director at BioTools Innovator. And with me today are 4 people that you really want to talk to if you are interested in strategic partnerships. And so we will start alphabetically. So we'll start with you, Charlie. So Charlie Purcell at Danaher Innovation, I will let you introduce yourself briefly. So if you could just give a brief background about yourself, your company, and your role there.
Great. So I'm Charlie Purcell. I'm part of what we call Danaher Equity Ventures, which is Danaher's corporate venture group. I was one of the founding members. We started this about 5 years ago. I've led more than a dozen of our investments and presently serve on 8 different boards of companies that we're an investor in. Previously at Danaher, I spent about 5 years as part of the M&A group and also headed up business development and strategy for a couple of different operating companies, again, before starting Equity Ventures. Previous to Danaher, spent 20 years outside within the biotech industry and in a variety of roles, whether it's business management or other types of transactional roles. So I have a ton of experience with different types of companies, whether it's tools, therapeutic, informatics, or other service type organizations, and again in a variety of roles and transactions, from co-development, co-marketing, in-out licensing, M&A, and in the last 5 years wearing an investor and board hat.
Thank you, Charlie. And we'll talk, of course, later about some of those things you touched on as part of how you engage with strategic. So we'll move on to Matt now, Matt Baker with Thermo Fisher Scientific. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, I'm Matt Baker, and I lead our strategy and business development for one of our businesses that we call Protein and Cell Analysis. So we really, to its namesake, we really are interested in any sort of product that helps analyze, detect, measure, characterize cells and proteins. I've been with Thermo Fisher for about 12 years, held various different roles from R&D, marketing, but always seemed to end up landing back in business development. Prior to that, I've worked for several small startup companies, owned a company myself, and have always been very interested in innovation and pursuing innovation and bringing it to market. So I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Matt. And we'll jump to Norio Hashimoto with Nissan Chemical America Corporation. I will note here that Nissan Chemical is one of our partners at BioTools Innovators. So I will let Norio introduce himself.
Hi. Nice to meet you. My name is Norio Hashimoto, General Manager of Life Science Material Department of Nissan Chemical America Corporation. Our company, Nissan Chemical, is a medium-sized chemical company in Japan. But we have some healthcare businesses related to the small molecules, RNAs, peptides, and some of the cell therapy, especially material side. My responsibility is to seek a collaboration opportunity in the United States, including the in-license, out-license, and also some of the joint development and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Noria. And last but not least, we will also have Tad Wins of Agilent Technologies here with us in the panel. So Tad, go ahead.
I'm glad you added not least, but like everyone else, thanks so much to Biotech Innovators for having us all together. I'm gonna find this discussion really interesting. As you can tell, there's a typical path to our position here. So I follow that train. I'm a chemical engineer. I began my career in petrochemical engineering and construction, got an MBA, started and sold a couple of companies before arriving at Agilent. For those that don't know Agilent, Agilent's a life science, applied markets, tools, reagents, software service company. And at about $7 billion in revenue and 20 years old, I think that makes us the youngest and smallest of the companies on the panel today. So you can consider us a startup compared to the rest of these companies. I'm the managing director of the Early Stage Partnership Program. We kind of span the two sides. We're a corporate venture capital company, as well as we have startups that partner with Agilent and work through us. So back to you all.
Thank you so much for this introduction. So let's dive in and start with the first question. So you all mentioned kind of the different ways to engage with companies, and I think while most startups are really mostly aware of straight M&As and acquisitions or investment, what are kind of the other models like co-development, licensing, so on and so forth, and how do you typically engage with startups at your organization? We'll start with the last now. So Tad.
How to engage? Generally, we engage poorly with startups. I think that's generically the approach. Agilent, and I assume others on the panel believe kind of that the pace of innovation has accelerated. So we're all touching the startup community a lot more than we did 20 years ago, where we just did corporate central research and university research. So I think everyone on this panel is really flexible in how we deal with the companies. You mentioned co-development. We do co-development, we do licensing, we do co-marketing, we do strategic investments, we do joint ventures occasionally, but it's a little tough, I think, in the tools industries to do that. So anyway, I don't think that there's a model, a standard model that we'd all use, and I think we're all flexible depending on which division you're dealing with, which organization within our companies you're dealing with.
Thank you, and let's ask Matt now. Is that something that you feel is kind of similar at Thermo Fisher and how you engage with startups, or is there any typical model to how you typically engage with them?
Yeah, I would say most frequently we engage with them on a sort of co-development, licensing, even in some cases OEM type of opportunity. I mean, we are really big about leveraging the size and breadth of our organization to bring innovation to customers, and we don't pretend like we can do it all ourselves. So we actually spend quite a bit of time and effort in looking for new technologies, searching for new technologies, engage a lot with startups and even what I would call pre-startups to a certain extent. A lot of people that are looking for early investment rounds. People who perhaps have already had some small investments but are really looking for a partner to finalize a product or bring a product to market. So I would say that's by far where we focus the most. And then obviously I'm a complete opposite end of the spectrum, as I think most people are probably aware here. I mean, Thermo Fisher tends to acquire quite a few companies and had a strong history of acquisitions. We probably tend to do the least amount in terms of equity investing any sort of non-M&A, right? So that in-between area. So I would say, again, really about licensing, partnership, co-development, M&A, and probably not as much in the middle.
And I guess we'll talk a little bit later about what kind of helps you make the decision, which way deals are going, but I think we'll touch on that a little bit later. We'll go to Norio now and then Charlie, because Charlie might be a little bit different, representing a corporate venture arm. So we'll start with Norio and then go to Charlie.
Okay, and our company, Nissan Chemical, does not have a corporate venture capital, so we have no like a capital investment opportunities. But we would like to use our technologies to solve the technical uncertainty, especially in the early stage. So we have some expertise in small molecule manufacturing, peptide manufacturing, and so on. So we would like to have some collaboration opportunity. For example, the company has a good candidate for the drug, but no scale-up manufacturing capabilities. We can support such kind of activities as a partner, not a CDMO, and start a strategic collaboration after that. And that is our current model of the collaboration.
Interesting, thank you. And then Charlie, I'll let you comment on how you typically engage with early stage companies.
So my focus is really exclusively on making investments in these companies, but oftentimes as a result of those investments, it's maturing into what I'd call open innovation partnerships, whether it could be co-marketing, it could be a OEM or channel partnership, it could be co-development, types of relationships that often emerge after we've made an investment. I think we found early on it's a lot easier to deploy capital in investments. You can make a decision really quickly and go from engagement to funding in a couple of months. Whereas if you're entering into some sort of strategic partnership, those conversations tend to take 6 months, 12 months, or even longer. And so oftentimes we're leading with an investment. We're often sometimes we know that a company is not right for an investment, or at least at that stage, and we can also facilitate conversations internally. And sometimes we don't make investments, but operating companies may be interested then in some sort of partnership along the lines of, again, co-marketing, channel, co-development, or licensing. So we certainly help connect people to the right partners there.
Well, I was going to ask a different question now, but I guess based on all of your answers, let's jump to talking about, so how would you advise a company that is in conversations or starting to be interested in these strategic partnerships? How would they go about finding out what is the best model for them to engage with a strategic? I'll let Charlie continue.
Well, we touch about 400 companies in a year within our group, so we're a great conduit to make connections internally. We're really well networked within Danaher, and understanding enough from a pitch from a company, we can sort of redirect that conversation stage and make warm introductions. So we can be a really good conduit for those sorts of engagements directly with operating companies. But apart from through us, I think the typical points of entry for those conversations are head of business development or a general manager of a group that has an overlapping interest with that company. Those would be the two optimal entry points for Danaher.
All right, thank you. And Tad, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's almost identical to Charlie. As Charlie knows, he and I are both co-investors in several companies. So we operate kind of the same way. We see 500. We saw 530 companies last year, and we didn't invest in all of them. but the way in, we do hear that pitch. We do make the introductions where it makes sense to the operating divisions. But if you were coming in from the outside, either finding one of us here on the panel, or that's usually a good start, because we're usually the liaisons in, and we can help navigate that and honestly tell you if it even makes sense from the beginning. Most of our answers are no, it probably doesn't make sense for you to be engaging with us, at least not at this time. So,
and we'll touch, that's a good point, and we'll touch on that point where how to know if to continue that discussion or not, but we'll table that for now. Matt, any last comment on this specific point?
I think that's right. I mean, in addition to business development, we also have corporate development, right, which is a avenue for folks to get in touch and get engaged. Probably the only other significant thing I would add is that we tend to get a lot of engagement through our R&D colleagues, right? I mean, we kind of, is one of our missions at Thermo Fisher, again, is innovation. It's one of our 4 core principles. So we really encourage our R&D folks to really reach out and become engaged with research at a very early stage to more commercialized opportunities. So I'd say that's a really good opportunity. Going to trade shows, going to conferences, trying to find any sort of associations with expertise through LinkedIn. Those are all really good things, I think, to try to find somebody within a company that maybe shares your passion, or that has it works in a very similar area that you think you could connect with and form a connection.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt. Technical conferences, peer-reviewed papers, we get a lot of internal people reaching out to us saying, "Have you ever heard of this company?" Just because they found something at a technical conference that they hadn't known before.
Yeah.
And I think we had one of the things that our companies here were interested naturally, and kind of to follow up on what you said. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on what are these places that are the best places to meet people in the business development or otherwise in the corporate venture world that are good conferences, or otherwise, emailing lists, whatever, that are relevant
other than
to
BioTools
space?
Innovator? Being the
I was hoping someone would say that, yeah. More specifically, yes, to conferences or any other meetings that you would recommend companies in that industry to attend, to be there, to be present, to kind of increase their visibility.
So I think going to what Matt was saying and building on that, making yourself known within the technical community and as being different. So if you're flow cytometry, going to Cyto and giving those papers, if you're a mass spec, going to ASMS and giving those papers, or having poster sessions and then talking to the companies there, just making sure that your technology is known is a good way to introduce yourselves to the larger corporate people.
The conferences can be tricky, because if you're early stage, you don't have a product and you may not want to be telegraphed too much. Conferences may not be appropriate unless you're at sort of launch stage or post-launch. So there are some partnering events. Again, the pitch to BioTools, I think these sorts of forums are great because they're intimate. You've got people who are very receptive to learning about new things and helping to connect. There are some organizations like ALDA as well, but for analytical instrumentation as an example, that are good, and they're open to even pre-revenue type companies. So from a networking point of view, they have a very senior level of participation, and yet they're still pretty intimate. So my bias is always towards something that's not overly gigantic.
Too big.
and that you have sort of the right level of engagement and entry. And then some of these meetings that are set up for partnerships are, again, there's a format for connecting, even if they're large events like Bio, they had a pretty good partnering track. Those could be good ways. JPM Morgan, Universe is there. They have sort of the shadow organizations and lots of pre-revenue, early stage companies that are there on the fringes. So those are some of the usual suspects. But there are a ton of conferences, and it really depends on the technology and the customers that you're trying to engage or partners you're trying to engage.
Yeah, thank you. And these sound like really great resources. And as you said, I guess it really comes down to who your customers are, who are the strategics you're looking for, and what is your technology doing, and what's the specific field you're at. Let's switch gears a little bit. I'll start with you, Norio. What is the main benefit that you're looking for in a startup when you're bringing in or engaging with a startup in any capacity? Is it new markets? Is it access to the IP? What is it really that you're looking for and will provide value to you?
As I said, our company's strategy is to use our current technology for the future development. So our company's style is B2B. We have no clinical development and also the no B2C promotion. So we are seeking the supporting the development of the startups. So, and also our company is a Japanese company. We have a lot of network with Japanese companies and the Japanese professor. So if the startup is interested in international, especially Asian market, we can connect such kind of marketing opportunities. And from our point of view, we have some project internally. So we would like to expand our project to the, for example, other applications, and also some kind of in-license for the current substitute of the current project solutions. So we are seeking such kind of opportunities for the joint development.
Great, thank you. How about you, Matt? What is Thermo Fisher typically looking for when engaging with a startup? I know you said before that this is not just just a financial issue, but more that you're taking this seriously, as you said. But I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, not to underemphasize financials. I mean, they're obviously have to drive any business principle. But we really have to understand the opportunity, right? It's all about strategy and where it fits. There are so many different things you can do. It's very easy to get distracted unless you really have a very strong strategy and you stick to that strategy. So we typically really predefine the areas that we're really interested in, and we try to really stick to those areas so we can be more efficient and more effective at actually analyzing opportunities. So while something may be really exciting and really interesting science, right, and it gets a lot of people excited, we generally have to kind of temper our excitement a lot of times and take a step back and look and say, does this really fit into our strategy and what we want to do? Because even though we're a large company, we really have to focus our resources and make really smart decisions. So I think that goes back to maybe what somebody else said early, right? I think one of the things really quickly is to try to understand, is there really an opportunity? Is there really a strategic fit? Because different companies may have different strategies. There may be different areas of product innovation, product focus. So I think it's really about trying to cast a broad net and really find somebody that somewhere that you can find somebody that has that strategic alignment and really interest in the product.
Thank you. And Charlie or Tad, any additional thoughts on that?
No, I would emphasize that strategic fit is really, really important. And, if you're not getting a response, you're probably getting a good answer as to whether or not there's much of a fit there. And again, we're seen as big companies with tons of resources and with broad interests, and yet, where we're going to spend money, especially externally, the bar is even higher to forge outside partnerships. And it doesn't mean that we're closed to that. In fact, I think Matt had brought this up, that we're more predisposed to seek innovation externally than before, but it is still very, very focused in specific areas. So you'll find when we're receptive, I think we'll move quickly. If it's on the fringes of things that are of interest, things will take a very long time and may never come to fruition.
Thank you. And I think you mentioned you're more predisposed to look at external innovation now, but I want to address the little elephant in the room. Given the current environment, the economic environment, what does it look like for your companies? I'd be interested in hearing if you're changing your investment forecast. Is your company expanding or reducing or maintaining the same level of engagement with startups? We'll start with Tad.
I think for all of us right now, things are pretty good in the tools industry, if you look at our reports. So specifically for us, we're not changing anything about what we call our early stage partnership model, either our investments or our external partnerships here. But again, as both Charlie and Matt and Norio said, it's got to fit into the strategy, and we see a whole mess of really cool technologies, but it's most of our rejections are it doesn't fit into our strategy. So, but I don't think we've changed anything. We've become more sensitive to valuations and how much money exists in a startup. But other than that, we haven't changed anything.
Well, I'm sure there's a sigh of relief amongst our attendees. Charlie, how about you?
I'd echo Tad's comments. I think it's a more difficult fundraising environment for companies that were caught short or didn't have much runway. It's challenging and it's reflected in lower valuations. But we typically see downturns in industries as really more times for opportunity. I think again, if there's a strategic fit and it exists outside, we're continuing to invest. We're opening up new channels of innovation. So as far as we're concerned, innovation is more and more relevant, and we're spending more and more, including externally.
Well, that is great to hear. And we keep saying strategic fit. So let's address this. So first of all, I think one of the questions that our cohort brought up is, how do I really know what are the strategic interests of the partner, of the strategic partners we're after? So is it enough to look at your website? Do I need to dig deeper? Do I need to kind of make a connection with someone? Do you typically broadcast your strategic interests, and how do I know who to approach? So I'll let Matt start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to a lot of what we maybe already said. I think it's a matter of trying to find people in the organizations that have the relevant interest to your products, and maybe something that like Charlie said as well, and in that just because you don't get interest from a specific company doesn't mean it's not an interesting technology, right? So I guess maybe part of my feedback is going to be don't give up. A lot of this is about being persistent. It's about timing. It's being about the right place at the right time. Sometimes honestly people are just super busy on a project. So maybe patience, perseverance. Don't give up.
And Ted?
Well, Matt, don't give up in general, but if one of my pet peeves is companies not taking no as an answer. If we say no, it's not a strategic fit, please be nice about it in response. Say enjoyed the conversation. Can I reach back out in 8 months? And if we say no, it's not a strategic fit, then it's probably not a good fit. So, but I don't think that answered the question, but it jumped over onto one of my pet peeves. But the company had better have looked at our website before they talk to us, especially if they're reaching out to us. If it's they better know a little bit about us to start with. And one of the other pet peeves is a competition chart showing all the other companies here and not mine on that competition chart. So if you're going to talk to me, make sure that if Thermo's there, if Danaher's there, if Lumina's there, Agilent better be on that little chart. Otherwise, you're telling me it's not a fit, right? But to start with, but you don't. Yeah, sorry, Charlie. Go ahead. I was just going to finish by saying that you're not expected to know us in great depth, but you better know a little about us.
Yeah, and
Charlie, you were going to add
joiner
something?
to that is, we're not going to broadcast the intimate details around strategy. So until you're actually engaged with the right people, and typically that's considered confidential information. And things work when it's a very high strategic priority, typically some sort of a gap, and we're not necessarily telegraphing that. So that requires an NDA. It requires getting a lot of feedback and really listening to what you're hearing in conversations with the combination of technical and business leaders. And critical question is, where is this in your priorities? Really drill down that question. It may be seen as, quote, strategic, but if it's a tertiary want as opposed to an imperative, where it fits in terms of priority is really critical to ascertain.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just step back in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to address your thing, I wasn't suggesting to be annoying, and a nuisance or anything like that. But my point was earlier, to the question, you've got to find the right people, right? And you got to make sure you got alignment, because back to the earlier discussion, it may not be a strategic fit and within one part of Thermo Fisher, right? But there might be another part of Thermo Fisher that actually it is a fit. In the larger organizations, especially, I think, you have to make sure that you're talking to all the right people. In some situations, right? Like if you were talking directly to me, I may not know about everything that's happening in Thermo Fisher, even. So, stay persistent in trying to make those connections throughout the organization and to groups and individuals that you think would have interest or should have interest in your product.
So definitely you're saying be proactive and not just assume that if they talk to you or someone else at some entry point in your company, that doesn't necessarily mean there's not an interest somewhere else. And I think that's an important takeaway message for everyone here. I want to switch gears a little bit again and talk about how you get there. So the communication and that process to get to these conversations. Let's start with the obvious. At what stage should a startup start thinking about strategic partnerships or start seeking them actively? Is there a too early, too late? Let's start with Norio.
Yeah, maybe it's different according to the end product style. So But our company case, we would like to start a discussion from the early stage because our expect to collaborate for the, for example, the manufacturing and also the development from the early stage. So we are seeking the early stage collaboration opportunities from the technical point of view. Yeah, but it's very difficult to what is the early stage or yeah. So maybe after the submitting IP, we would like to start a discussion. It's okay to start a discussion under NDA from our side.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. Let's go to Tad now. Hear from you. What is a typical?
Yeah.
What is a good time?
And as Norio said, it depends where you are in the corporation. For us, if you're familiar with the TRL, those technology readiness levels, a TRL of 3 or 4, proof of concept is not too early to talk to us. Our divisions are, we're much more willing to take risk and look at that technology risk and think early about things. Our divisions are much less risk averse. So a TRL of 3,000, and for those of you who know, it only goes up to 9. They're less risk averse before they'll start talking to you. If you're not willing to talk to us without an NDA, it's probably too early for you, because like everyone else on this panel, our company spends hundreds of millions of dollars on R&D. We're not going to sign an NDA unless we know some of the basics about the technology before we start getting engaged. And people say, oh, we're not going to talk to you without an NDA, and that's fine, but we won't talk to them.
No, that's, I think, even was a very specific question from our cohort, and it's good to know. And I think Charlie was going to comment on something on that question as well. Charlie?
Yeah, I think I was just going to iterate. Definitely make sure that if you have IP, make sure that at least provisionals are filed and ideally even converted. There have been companies who've come to us even before that stage, and we don't want to hear that. We don't want to contaminate, especially if it's an area of interest, and you don't want to have a foot foul and make things unpatentable by virtue of disclosure. So that would definitely be too early. And then I would just, if you're not clear on what you're asking for, oftentimes companies are engaging without really having clarity in terms of what's even the purpose of the engagement. But I think it's really important to spend the time, be thoughtful around what it is that you're actually seeking. And then big questions around it depends, is it going to be too early for companies? And then lastly, these agreements, especially if it's more of a commercial agreement, they take a long time. So if you're looking for a channel partner, if you're not in late beta and you've got the system pretty well locked down, it might be too early for commercial stage discussions. So just be aware of what you're asking for. Can that company do the diligence required to be able to make a decision, and make sure you're allowing enough time so that realistically, if you can have an agreement in place to have the impact that you're seeking. If you're expecting an commercial agreement to be ready in 3 months and you're relying on a partner for a launch, that's really risky. That's probably not the right timing for that conversation.
So the time frame that you're talking about is closer to a year than it is.
Typically, and especially anytime someone's putting their own brand or mark or putting a sales force and resources behind it, it takes a long evaluation and diligence period. It could take months even to set a part number up in a system and put something in a box if it's putting someone else's brand on it. So these little details, it takes surprisingly long time in large companies. Smaller companies can move a lot quicker on things around packaging, branding, system setup.
I think that's a really great point. It is really about expectations. I mean, although we have and can move fast, right? A lot of times there's just only so much you can do, and a lot of smaller companies don't realize the level of detail you have to go through to launch a product, right? They don't understand there's import-export compliance. There's there's quality teams, there's operations, there's logistics. There's a reason why big companies, do a good job getting all these products out, is because they have all this rigor and all these systems in place. But it does take time. I would also, agree with the team too. And a lot of times companies come to us and the first thing they do is ask for an NDA. And what I would recommend is that companies come to you able to talk about the technology at a high enough level that they don't have to disclose confidential information, because they're going to waste a lot of time there. And in fact, at Thermo Fisher, we don't, I think very much what Charlie was saying too, we don't like to do NDAs unless we find there's a lot of interest there and we need to understand how something's working. Because it helps us to speed up, whether or not we think there's any synergy there, and whether or not there's any sort of opportunity. The final thing that I just would add to the team is make sure you've got data, right? Concepts are great, but data rules, right? Concepts are concepts, right? I think a lot of people have concepts, but you actually have to have data to support your concept, or it's too early.
That's actually a perfect segue, because I did want to start addressing the do's and don'ts. So what are some positive signs? And without naming names, it would be great if you could even give an example. What are some things that were really a great sign for you in conversations with startups to know that this could go somewhere? And conversely, what are some red flags? Let's continue with Matt and then move on to the rest.
Sorry, did you say Matt?
I hope she said Matt, because I wasn't ready to answer the question.
Sorry, I didn't hear for sure. So I guess you did say Matt. Yeah. So do's and don'ts. Again, I would say, do be prepared to talk about your technology at a very high level. What differentiates your technology, right? Like a lot of times, I think people think their technology is obvious and how it differentiates, but it's really important, I think, to sort of spell that out. You got to understand a lot of times when you're talking to people and companies, right? They're thinking about 30 different things in a day, right? You kind of have to make that more obvious, right? And how it differentiates itself. What is the value proposition, right? It's just going to make things, it's the classic things that make things cheaper, faster, less labor, less input. What are the true value propositions? The other thing that's really great, and I think a lot of people don't think about, and that we think about extensively though, is voice of customer, right? Have they actually tested what they think their value proposition is with real customers? If they actually talk to customers other than a couple of KOLs? I think people tend to think, right away, well, I'm going to go to a couple of KOLs that I know are super interested and super, tech savvy, and I'm going to try to, get them to collaborate and work with them, which is great, because I think that helps with adoption. But I think a lot of people tend to shortcut kind of getting that true voice of customer. So I'd say those are a lot of the do's. Again, the don'ts, I think, are, don't come without data, don't come without, some sort of a market assessment. I think that's another really important thing. And then I think it's, don't come with, expectations that, something is going to happen immediately, right? It's a process and it takes time. It's my 2 cents at least.
Oh, that's great. I think that was very extensive, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. Ted, anything to add to this? If you're ready.
Oh, that was Matt too. Okay, back to Matt. No. The other thing that's important to us is culture and the people. And it's you were asking for an example, but just building on what Matt said, coming in without admitting that you don't know all the answers and being aware of those answers that you don't know of and how you're going to get them, how you're going to reduce those risks is also really important to us. If you come in and think you know all the answers, it's really tough for us to buy into. Even if it's the greatest idea, it's tough for us to buy into the management team as a company. So, and I was thinking specifically of one company, and they've been very successful and they've gone public, and it was an investment mistake on our part, but it wasn't a cultural mistake because they're acting the same way as a public company.
No, that's a really interesting and important point. Thank you for that addition. Norio, how about you?
Already Matt said our company's case is also differentiation from the competitive or conventional technology. It's one of the big points to evaluate. And also our company's case, we do not have a end product business model. So how to establish the business model after joint development with a startup is also one of the important points. How to make a profit for the Nissan Chemical in the future as well. And also our company's case sometimes license out to pharmaceutical company or other big company. In this case, Ted mentioned the culture is very important for us. Yeah, sometimes it's very difficult to collaborate with a big company because of their requirement is very high sometimes. So we should talk with people how to collaborate with them, including the culture and people. That is the important point to license out for us.
No, that's great. It's great that there's the strategic fit and the cultural fit as one aspect of it. And Charlie, I will let you add any thoughts to this.
Yeah, no, I think all the comments resonate so far. Again, we're really looking for that clarity around the problem that they're trying to solve, and then the connection with how their technology addresses that very specifically. What makes that a sustainable position? These are some of the things that we're looking for. I've often seen business models that don't make sense. They're either the price point is really low and there are not enough customers, or it's really high and they're assuming very low support costs and short sales cycles. So having some sensibility around a business model up front, are you going to sell it direct? Are you going to rely on distributors? How entrenched are competition? These are things that we're looking for, and you often don't see it in early stage, and it is a little bit of a pet peeve around these total available markets that are based on a drug product as opposed to the tool that they're selling. And then that leads to these,
or cancer, Charlie. We're addressing cancer.
And that tends to lead to really unrealistic expectations around the top line model. There are only a handful of companies who've gone to zero to over $100 million in a few years, and I've seen probably 100. I've seen hundreds of business models that have presumed that, and you lose credibility pretty quickly when you're not stating the true value of the product and translating that into a realistic penetration into a market.
Charlie, I think you bring up a really good point, right? I mean, I think it's very difficult, right, to forecast and do models and stuff like that, but make sure that your model is not, it passes a sniff test, right? I mean, even some small companies that we see, that show 50% CAGRs, right? That 50% CAGR was going from 1 to 5 million, right? You cannot expect those numbers are very small. So also understand that there are, you can't make assumptions that as you get to 10, 20, $30 million, right, that there aren't other ceilings you have to sort of get past, because it becomes exponentially more challenging. I'm understanding that a lot of times people try to value their technology, based upon some sort of multiple. I think that the other maybe important part there that Charlie made, but to maybe add more clarity around one of my other comments, is when I talk about markets, it's actually accurate market data, right? I mean, I think we do get a lot of people who come to us and they have this, this really large number, like I'll throw single cell out there, right? I mean, one of the really attractive business segments that's grown exponentially. But a lot of times people are including the cost of sequencing, and they're including all these other things that aren't directly applicable to what they're actually selling, right? So do your homework in that way, and just make sure that you're presenting a realistic case, because I think you'll get more receptivity, even if you're more conservative. And I know that that's counterintuitive to kind of what we're taught, but I think it's accurate.
And it's building on that just a little bit. It's remembering that we're corporates. We have those bottom lines that we pay attention to in those business models. We're not the pure financial guys. Keep telling them about the billion-dollar markets, but tell us exactly where you're going to fit within us. Yeah.
And maybe one.
I think that's great. I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I say one more specific is, if you're looking for some sort of channel partnership, don't presume that a 20 or 30% margin is going to motivate a strategic partner. I see, people are thinking distributor margins for commodities. That just won't motivate. So unless you have super high margins, it's really hard then to be partnering with strategics, because they probably need 50% or even higher margins to be motivated. Just remember, it's very dilutive to their bottom line.
Another very good point.
I hope everyone's taking notes, because these are excellent points and things that definitely all of them should be practicing. Let's drill down into that point that you were talking about. Is there any other? I know Matt mentioned actual voice of customer. Is there any other data that you consider as a very positive signal from companies, or some key milestones that you would want to see and kind of check the box when you see them with companies? Charlie, I'll let you continue.
These questions are hard because they're so general.
We're here to ask hard questions.
It always depends. When there is third-party validation from people who are instantly credible, whether it's a KOL or an agency or somebody, that's really important. And even just data from well-run experiments, if it's earlier, people often aren't. They're showing pretty pictures, but they're not showing sort of the integrity or rigor or depth and breadth of data that they've generated from a platform. And so, I think those are the things that really matter. And it's surprising. We've often found people haven't run the obvious experiment to validate a key selling point around the technology. And it's like, oh, we haven't done that yet, but we're thinking about doing it. Well, that's the thing that's really going to sell, that the killer application has been demonstrated, or you understand the mechanism of action of something, and it's validated through your understanding here. And if you don't have that, then it's probably too early. It's really hard to develop a lot of conviction around a new technology.
Fair point. And then I know Matt has to drop very soon, so I'll let him comment on that first, and then we'll say goodbye to you in advance in case you have to drop really quickly. So go ahead.
Yeah, and apologize. I have to drop, but I think we've pretty much said most everything, right? It's having data that stands up to scrutiny, right? I mean, it's I'd hesitate to say, publication type quality, right? Because a lot of times we do understand, right? There's a lot to figure out, but just be prepared to, back up your data. Be prepared to really sell the value prop. I mean, imagine you're trying to, really connect with the customer, right? Make sure that you've got your markets understood. Make sure that you've I think it was mentioned before that there's a match with the audience that you're talking to. So be audience aware. And I think once you do a couple of these with companies, you'll start getting feedback, right? I mean, I think you'll start seeing where people get really interested, right? So refine your presentation, right? Kind of listen to your audience, and then kind of where you do kind of seem to get some interest, maybe build out that story a little bit more, and make it a living document. Don't just do the same thing over and over again.
Norio, I'll let you take that question as well.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you so much
Everybody.
for joining us. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet everybody.
For our case is, we would like to use technology for the future development. So one of the important points is the robustness of the patent is important, including the data reliability. So we usually check the IPs, and also if there is a third party's data, it's fine. If not, we would like to evaluate by our service as a POC before starting the conversation.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. And Ted, I'll skip that question with you unless you did want to comment on that.
No.
Because I did want in the last couple of minutes of the public broadcast to address one more point. So some of our companies were really interested in understanding how to manage conversations with multiple strategics. How do you know what is the right fit when you're talking to some of the companies that are, initially you found the strategic fit, so all of these companies are kind of looking for innovation in that technology, in that area of your technology. But how do you kind of really understand what is the best strategic fit? And on the flip side of that, I think I'll let you also address is it really, if you're already engaged with a strategic in that industry, does that prevent or affect in any way involvement of further or other strategics that are probably competitors?
So there's the kind of the short answer to that is if you're engaged with Agilent, I highly encourage you not to engage with anyone else. But if you're engaged with any of our competitors, I highly encourage you to engage with us. But from a company point of view, you have to be able to manage all those relationships, and you have to be able to you're small, stay focused, make sure that you can answer all the questions from all the strategics that you're involved in. If you're a front end of a larger system, it's to your advantage to be able to fit with all the systems out there on the market, right? Not just one company. But don't try to hide it from us. There are people that move from company to company, and we really don't like it if we find out through the grapevine that you're talking to someone else. Just be honest and straightforward and tell us all. And if we're going to have a problem with it, then we're going to have an even bigger problem with it if we find out secretly through some back channel. So that's
absolutely. And I see Charlie nodding, so I'll let you add to that, and then we'll stop the public broadcast. But Charlie, last words on that?
Yeah, I'd echo the comments. I mean, it's pretty rare. Well, again, it depends. If you have a device that connects with all sorts of different strategic devices, generally you're going to maximize your market opportunity by working with everybody, unless one party has just an overwhelming dominant position. So choose your partners well. It's pretty rare when you're working with multiple strategics. So that if you have that position. It can be great, but I would be transparent. It can also provide some leverage in the conversation because strategics have a fear of missing out. But it's pretty rare. And I think the bigger question is often to partner or not. And wearing a board hat, I'm often advising, look, you don't want to lose that intimacy with customers, and it really, you learn a lot by that direct engagement. So be careful about picking partners, and it can create, it could be a good thing picking a partner because they're going to be your likely acquirer. It could be a poison pill for other potential strategic relationships, whether it's for partnership or future acquisition as well. If you've partnered with one and a large percentage of your revenues is going through that channel, it makes it a little bit more difficult and uncertain for another company if they're looking at you to partner or to be acquired by that company. So just choose your partners well. And don't enter.
No pressure, but do it right the first time. All right, I think that's a really good.
And we all make good
point.
partners. Everyone on this call makes good partners.
Absolutely, and I think that's a fantastic point to say goodbye to our live stream viewers and kind of switch into our Q&A, where our cohort gets to ask questions that are more specific to their company and their situation. And so thank you, everyone. I just want to thank everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
And our viewers here. And so you can tune in again next week, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, for our next webinar on sales and marketing in bio.